Today on Jeff Kelderman's Garage, we're driving the Superbird. Hey, Jeff Kelderman here. Welcome to my garage. For each episode, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna grab a hot rod, bike, a race car, and we're gonna sit down and talk about how I took this car and how we turned it into what it is today. And the prize in my collection, the original Joe Dirt movie car. So when you got deer tape tattooed on your ribs and this car comes up for sale at Barrett-Jackson, you're gonna figure out a way to make it work. And I did. Speaking of American muscle, we've even got Kyle Petty's high school car right here. Hell, even my wife's car's 550 horsepower. We're even gonna get out of the garage a little bit. We got a couple special places this thing's going that you're really gonna like. You're gonna follow me to the racetrack and see how good or maybe not so good a driver I am. You're gonna see a lot of Viper action. 6-speed, old school, no traction control. What could go wrong? It's hard to believe. I've had this car for over 23 years. It's a crazy story how I got it. It's even crazier when you hear the places it's been. So this is a 1970 Plymouth Superbird. You know, back in the NASCAR days, the competition was crazy between Dodge and Ford. You know, Ford had that Torino Talladega, and it was extremely fast. 69, Dodge made the Daytona, which is a clone, kind of what the Joe Dirt clone is. Got the wing and the beak on it, you know, for aerodynamic purposes. So Richard Petty, who's running Plymouth, didn't have the Daytona. So he actually switched over and ran a Torino with Ford for 1 year. He says he knew that's the only way he was gonna stay competitive. Well, Plymouth, they lost the king, man. You lose the king. Desperate times, desperate measures. So they came out with the Superbird. Basically, very similar to the Dodge Daytona, just a little different wing, a little different beak. They put this on their Roadrunner. Besides the wing and beak, one of the most important things they did on these cars is they took the rear and they filled in the window. So if we look at the picture of the regular Charger, they made a piece to fill that in because air would suck in there and it would create a drag. So everybody immediately knows about the wing and beak, but the rear window was also one of the most important things they did to make this car go so fast. So this car here is a V code, which means it's got the 446 pack. All the cars they made had either a 444 barrel, 6 barrel, or the big Hemi. You know, the big Hemis are the ones you see on Barrett-Jackson selling for $1 million. Unfortunately, I just got the lowly 446 pack. So I'll tell you about the story about how I got this in a little while. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff we did to this car. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't care. It's a hot rod. It was my first hot rod. I got this car in 2001, and to me, it's a muscle car. And anything I did to this, yes, it could go back to be restored original like it came off the showroom floor. I'm not interested in the 14-inch bias ply tires. I want some big meats. That's why we got 20-inch American Racing torque thrusts on this. This car was at SEMA in 2006, and that was American Racing's 50th anniversary. So they had it in their booth there. One of the reasons I went with the torque thrust, besides giving it a real kind of a modern resto mod look. You know, today, you see muscle cars all the time with big fat tires and big brakes. 23 years ago, we were kind of some of the first ones to try that. So behind these American Racing torque thrusts, we got some bare brakes, drilled and slot rotors. That way we can stop on a dime. So for the interior on this, I didn't want vinyl. I wanted real leather. So we got some awesome seats here. They've been holding up really well because they've been in there for 20 years now. Quarter stick, you're gonna have an automatic, in my opinion, muscle car, you gotta be able to slap those gears. Last but not least, we got the footprint gas pedal from my favorite movie, Joe Dirt. Cars, got damn license plate. You gotta park right next to the damn pump. I parked too far away. Going old school here, baby. Can you imagine filling this thing up, snowing like a son of a bitch. You got to bleed clear down here. this car is crazy. So came home from church. It was in January of 2001, and I come home and I look on the table on the Wing Warrior newsletter, which is a Mopar monthly deal that came out, and I asked my wife, I said, how long has this thing been here? Because usually the day it arrives, I read that thing cover to cover, and we had just had a good year in our business. So I was in the market for a muscle car, and I didn't think I was going to end up with a Superbird by any means, but Roadrunner, Charger, something like that. And my wife, ex-wife, like, hey, it's been here since like Wednesday, and I'm like, dang. So anyway, I got the magazine, I'm looking through it. I look at the back, right there, it says 446 pack for sale. Hasn't been on the road since 1975. Vitamin C orange needs complete restoration. It's like 90% there. And I look, it's a 319 area code. That's Iowa. So I call the number, and a girl answers the phone. I said, hey, I'm calling about the car. And she's like, oh, Dad's out showing it to some guys from Minnesota right now. And I'm like, oh my God, this newsletter's been here for 4 days, and I didn't even know it. So I just said, please have them call this number the minute they leave. Well, nobody calls. So about an hour and a half later, I call back. I said, hey, calling about the car. And he's like, well, I think these guys from Minnesota are going to buy it. And I'm like, well, did they leave you a deposit? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, I'm over here in Oskaloosa, and I'd sure like to come look at the car if you'll give me maybe an hour tonight. And he's like, yeah, come on over. So me and my buddy Scott head over to Riverside, Iowa. It's a little over an hour away. And we get there, I mean, it is cold as a witch's tit. It is like 10 degrees below zero. And we go into this guy's pole barn, it's a metal barn, we had a little salamander heater. But anyway, opened up the door, bam, there it is, lights come on. There is the car of my dreams sitting in the corner. Tires are flat, just like you would expect a car to look that hasn't been on the road for 25 years. So we start talking, and I'm just like, 20 grand, I bought a company check, 20 grand, here you go, slapped on the toolbox. The guy's like, man, I can't do that. I gave these guys 24 hours to come up with the money. And I'm like, well, the ad says 20 grand, I'm here with 20 grand. Those other guys left without putting down the deposit. Let's make a deal. Man, I sat there for half hour and could not make a deal with this guy. And finally we had to leave, and I was just like heartbroken. Driving home, telling my buddy Scott, I said, that car of my dreams right there, and I can't get my hands on it. The guy would not let it go. So I go to bed, I was like, man, it's gonna be hard to sleep tonight. The guy said that he would call me the next day at 11 o'clock. That was what time, that's how much time those guys had to come up with the money. Day I'm at work, 11 o'clock comes and no call. So I'm like, man, I'm feeling really bad about this. So I call him and he picks up the phone. I said, hey man, what's the deal with the car? He was like, I got some bad news. Now I was ready to throw up all over my desk, and he says the price went up. And I'm like, oh really? So he says the price now is $24,000. I'm like, well, damn. I said, whether it was the right thing to do or not, I left that $20,000 check on his toolbox, and I said, tell you what, man, I'll bring you 4 grand tonight after work, but we're done playing games. And he goes, 24 grand, it's your car. So after work, me and my cousin Jerry loaded up our dually with a enclosed trailer, and we headed to Riverside, and we loaded this thing up. As you can imagine, like 10 degrees that night. We got stuck getting out of the driveway, but I tell you what, I've never forget that swing of emotions from when he says I got some bad news to bringing that car home 10 hours later. Mufflers are these little magna flows like they put on sprint cars in some of the towns they need where you can't run open headers. And then I I got BSR boom tubes, which are actually what they run on the NASCAR series. So we got one on each side. We got these little tiny mufflers, just enough to calm it down from open headers. And I tell you what, man, this thing just sounds like you're in the garage in NASCAR Cup Series race. $250,000 car. That's burnout, baby! So much fucking fun. Woo!
That was a good one.
Cool. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a 446 pack. So Plymouth, to meet NASCAR regulations, had to make just under 2,000 of them. They had like 1,980 some dealerships. So they had to make one car for every dealership. So the count goes, they made 1,000, 1,100, 444 barrels. They made around 735-ish 6-packs. Then the rest were the Hemi cars. So it's kind of cool to have, you know, you don't have the Hemi, but one step down to the 446 pack. So it makes this a lot more desirable, say, than the 444 barrel. So the minute we got this thing home, my cousin Jerry and I totally tore this thing down. We sent the motor and transmission over to Jim Van Z Racing, put a purple cam in it, freshened it up, you know, made it a strong running motor. Meanwhile, we sent the chassis, once it was torn down, to Des Moines, had it completely media blasted. At the time, I didn't have a rotisserie, so they didn't sandblast the bottom. When we got it back, I made a rotisserie and I sandblasted the bottom myself. So my buddy Scott and I painted this thing. Wasn't that worried about going completely original, so we painted the bottom of the car completely orange. I mean, everything on this is vitamin C orange. So like a lot of hot rod projects, you go balls to the wall at the start and you get about a year into it and then it kind of phases out. So this car actually sat in primer, you know, it was drivable, it ran, but you know, I needed that final SEMA. I knew that had SEMA coming up. I knew it was American Racing's anniversary. So ended up talking to them, made a deal to have it in their booth. So bam, we got SEMA crunch going on. Unfortunately, I decided to do this in around June, and SEMA is in November. So I had a small window. We had to finish painting the car, you know, get this thing show ready, and man, we made it happen. And really, I haven't done anything to the car except driving around a few times, take it to a few shows. I mean, this car has been coast to coast. So growing up, my dad always told me, you got to do stupid shit like this, stupid things are gonna happen. So we got a little hot, blowing out a little antifreeze. We'll have to let her cool off for a little while. we'll be good with that. So when you run a few burnouts like that, you can pretty much expect your tires to be junk. So didn't really upset me that much because these tires are literally 23 years old. So it's time for some new rubber. We'll get some new ones on there. Probably come back out and do the same damn thing to those tires. So the Superbird has been at a bunch of different shows. It's been on TV shows, it's been in magazines. So if we start at the beginning, you know, we talked about the SEMA Crunch, how we were going to have to get this done for the American Racing's 50th anniversary. So that was November of 2006. Then just we kept it in Vegas, and then it ran over to CES, which was in January. We'd been doing a bunch of stuff with Phoenix Gold Car Stereo on the truck side. So we had this thing full of stereo equipment, subwoofers. I mean, the purists just lost their mind. Here's a Superbird with 20-inch rims and full of stereo gear. I mean, it was like their worst nightmare. But got a lot of exposure from that. It was a great event. Then later on in the year, it went to Nashville, and Stacy David, a good friend of mine, you know, he used to be the host of Trucks TV and currently has, you know, Gears. He's been doing that for like 20 years. It was on the intro. First thing you saw when it said, "Welcome to Gears," was Stacy David's. Really cool. Good friend of mine. It was great to see that car on his show. Speaking of 07, if you're a numbers guy, July 7 of 2007, my brother loses his driver's license. And he was clock going 107. So, you know, I don't think he had it up to 177, but, you know, 777, he got clock going 107. So he got to walk a little while. I was actually driving the GTX, about the same speed. And I guess the orange car is a little more attractive to the police than the green GTX. So that's been a story we haven't ever forgot. So we did have one magazine cover with it. This magazine really never got real popular, but the cool thing was it was edition 1. So for them to choose the orange bird to be on the first cover, that was really special. So fast forward to 2012, Metallica comes out with what they call the Orion Music and More Festival. They're having the first one was in Atlantic City. So Rick Dorr, who builds a lot of custom hot rods for James Hetfield, was in charge of this. So you had to fill out an application and send some pictures in. So we sent pictures in of the Superbird and got accepted, as well as my Indian motorcycle and the green GTX. So we loaded those up into our stacker trailer and took them out with the shack truck. I actually rode my motorcycle out there, and cousin Jerry and Will, they jumped in shack and took the trek out to Atlantic City. So we had the cars on display there, met some really cool friends that I still talk to today. They did have a second Orion that they let us bring the cars back to. That was in Belle Island, Michigan, and was able to round up some pictures of that. They had the Superbird out in front of they had all these nice cars in the tent, but they put the Superbird out front to get the attention, bring people in. Hit the like button, subscribe button, tell your friends, tell your enemies, anybody who wants to hang out with the Kelderman crew. You can find us at Kelderman Trucks on Instagram. I'm at J Dierte on Instagram. And on YouTube, we're Kelderman Manufacturing. Same thing on Facebook.